I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition.
My next guest on the Business of Intuition is just a delightful guy. He's based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. He's a CEO of a very successful recruiting firm. And we had a wonderful conversation covering all things having to do with what have we learned about COVID and the Great Resignations? How should companies be able to prepare themselves for creating cultures that will attract and retain people? What should candidates be thinking about in terms of how to promote themselves in a way that makes them attractive? And then we kind of fell upon 5 or 6 different characteristics that the two of us came up with that I thought were wonderful. In fact, I think they should become the basis of the first 5 or 6 chapters of his book. And it had to do with 2 things. From the perspective of the employee or the potential employee, the candidate, what are 5 or 6 things that they should really be focusing on when it comes to their application and their interview? These are transferable skills, by the way. These are endemic skills that would be useful for anybody in any role. And then 2, what should the employer or the recruiter be looking for when sometimes we may not have the perfect candidate? We realize we may have to train these people once they come in our doors. But what are the characteristics or the competencies, behaviors that make somebody really shine, make somebody want us to be able to invest in them, even though they may not be a perfect fit? So I'm not going to tell you what those 6 things are. You're going to have to listen to the podcast, but it's I think, a pretty good list. So about my guest, Yvan Demosthenes is a sales professional with more than 20 years experience, 16 with talent acquisition and recruiting. His career has covered various sales and marketing and management roles. During his career, he has attended he's actually attained several awards from GE, CareerBuilder, Monster.com, and many others. Yvan has helped companies of all sizes with their online advertising, technology integration, diversity recruiting efforts, and the overall recruiting strategies. He has also had the pleasure of placing executives and emerging leaders into some of the most recognized companies. He's received his BS from the University of Cincinnati, his MBA from Thomas More University, and he also received his leadership training from Harvard Business School and has a D&I certification from eCornell. Yvan lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, and has 3 kids and a wonderful wife, and he's a great guest on the Business of Intuition. So, Yvan, Friday afternoon. Thanks for being a guest on the Business of Intuition. I wanted to start it off with, you were telling me before we hit the record button that you just came back from Harvard and you got a nice little certificate and now you're smart. I'm sure you were smart before. But my question is, you said you were doing a lot of work on purpose and trying to understand kind of like what makes you tick. What is your purpose and how does that relate to your work in recruitment? How do those align?
Yeah. So, Dean, happy Friday. Pleasure to be with you, my man. And thank you. My experience there at Harvard and in Cambridge was amazing. And the exercises they put us through, it really forced you to pour yourself out there in front of others, in front of your cohort and class. But, I really try to have my purpose align with everything else in my life. And, I shared with you, I just feel blessed to have had the parents that I had. And, I've had a great life. And whenever possible, I want to do that for others, even if it's a little bit. So really enhancing others is my purpose, assisting others. And my work really connects with that in the truest form, because as a CEO of a recruiting company, an executive and professional search company, I get to connect people every day with new opportunities, opportunities that oftentimes help elevate them, help get them out of situations, help move them forward to their ultimate aspirational goals. And I really feel blessed with that.
Cool. So
Yeah.
in that, let's pivot into that direction of your work around executive recruiting. Some would say, I've heard some statistics that something like 75% of employees have some form of burnout on a scale of really low to really high. 50% are looking for other work. 28% are saying that their biggest stress at work is their most direct supervisor. We've got this great resignation that we're still dealing with. Right now, our economy is limping along a little bit as we head into the end of July 2022. From your perspective and your coaching with the clients that you work with, how are successful companies now able to attract their new recruits? I know that money certainly is going to be important. And I know that some companies that we deal with have expanded their budgets to just outbid and provide more salary and bonuses to these people that they want. But aside from the money aspect, how do companies make themselves look attractive to a prospective candidate?
Yeah. Great question, Dean. And you're right. Money can always solve problems at the moment. It does. Without a true plan behind the money, it's usually temporary. So you'll find some companies that pay top dollar, they still have to deal with the churn and burn, the turnover, et cetera. I'm sure you and I can both, and your audience can think of companies like that too. Great money, but you know pretty quickly that you're not going to stay there long, right? Regardless of the money. So I would say I'm starting to see a little bit in this current day, which wasn't really the case pre-pandemic, but coming out of pandemic, companies that are transparent, are open, are really the ones that are doing a great job in bringing in new candidates, hiring them, onboarding them, and having these clients stay sticky. They're coming on board and not looking to the next opportunity. I've got a few companies in mind where the transparency and sharing their vision with these candidates and how they see their future and their future growth within the company is really, really doing well to attract and onboard these candidates. And it's quite amazing because it's fueling their growth, right? The growth that they're experiencing, they need these people, and these people are just fueling even more growth because they come in with so much energy and they're able to pick things up and hit the ground running, and they're growing with the company as well.
Excellent. So you mentioned transparency as being a key indicator or a key thing that a company should do to be able to attract new potential employees. Could you give me an example of what does not being transparent look like? And what does being transparent look like?
Yeah. So, the openness is really something that you can start to see. So I'll give you an example. I recruit for a lot of salespeople. And, finding that persona that you feel that matches up with your company really well is always something that all companies look for. But to actually detail that on the job description in a way that it's very clear is a very good sign and a tell, right? So imagine that if you write a job description and you want someone who you put in the job description, you want someone organized, you want someone who can manage their own schedule, have this, but ultimately you're just looking for someone who can go out and find their own business and just crush it, right? You want someone who is high in activity, someone who's relational, who knows how to be pleasantly persistent, not take no for an answer. And you start to see those things. And if I use the role of sales because it's easier to understand, that happens with other roles too, right? Marketing, it happens with management roles. If you can communicate and be open enough to, give a peek into what your culture is and what you're really looking for, it's very telling, right? We all want people who have these nice skills and degrees, but there's a big difference between someone who is very analytical versus someone who is relational and that you want them to use and leverage their relational skills. And same thing on the other end. There's someone, if you're asking for relational skills, but you really want someone analytical, that can be a barrier as well. So
like truth in advertising, if you will, when it comes to the job description.
I would say it's even more than truth in advertising, because I see it where I'm trying to coach, with difficult positions, I try to coach my clients along, and they're still bouncing back and forth. It's a pull and tug, right? They want this, but no, they don't want that. They're putting it on there.
Oh, in terms of the kind of client they want or employee they want.
Candidate, the kind of candidates they want.
Okay.
And they want to be, company appropriate, rather than really letting someone know exactly the environment that they're coming into, what that company really stands for, et cetera.
Let me ask you something too. I was talking to the foundation president of a healthcare company recently, and he was saying that the possibility of creating $1 billion endowment was definitely possible, but it would require everyone's effort, that it isn't just going to be this small team out there in philanthropy to be able to make this happen, that executives are going to have to lean in and provide leads and speak to the goals of the foundation and so on and so forth. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Is recruitment everybody's job? Should we be thinking about it as part of our C-suite's role? Should we be thinking that marketing and how we show up in social media and the kinds of LinkedIn posts that we do and podcasts that we're involved in, all of that, the entire totality of all of this is in a sense a part of recruitment?
100%. Dean, I'll say that might be a little bit of old way thinking, old school, but I believe really it's all hands on deck, right? I think it's the responsibility, and this is maybe not helping my business when I say this, but who knows better who's going to fit within your company than your own employees, right? So a robust referral program internally, I feel, is a must. You don't see that a lot anymore. When I started in the corporate world, that seemed like that was all over the place. I had friends and friends of friends referring me to their HR and their recruiters all the time. I don't get the sense that's happening as much anymore. But truly, I believe it is, to your point, the responsibility of everyone within the organization. All hands on deck. And, back in the day, the best way to know if someone was going to fit in the organization is if their friend fit in that organization, or if their parent fit in that organization, or if their neighbor who referred them was a good employee in that organization, right? So I couldn't agree with you more.
So let's pivot here a second. So you mentioned COVID, and you mentioned how things have changed a little bit, or maybe I just interpreted that in your comment. But if we think of COVID and the Great Resignation as a stress test, like banks have stress tests to see just how financially secure they are, we're in a situation right now where you're highly sought after, I'm sure, because we don't have enough people to do the work, and it's hard to find qualified people. And, talent acquisition is a number one on a lot of CEOs and C-suites priority list as they finish up 2022 and going into 2023. So if you go to big picture on me here, I guess, how do we get into this situation? What is the lessons learned from a company perspective? I know we can't control supply chain. In some ways, we might be somewhat removed from how the economy is having its struggles. I get that. But if this is sort of the lag indicator, of something that took place earlier, many, many months ago, maybe even years ago, maybe even decades ago, what's the overall lesson learned around how companies should be run in order to not repeat what we are now going through?
Yeah. Well, great point, Dean. And you're right. This has been going on for a long time. I know for me and those that I've been working with in this space, we've been shouting this out for a long time, but nobody wanted to listen. And that's the case, that there's just not enough people. The brain drain, I mean, if you go out to the West Coast in California, they've been dealing with that for years. Here in the Cincinnati region, there's been a brain drain here for the past 15 years. And you can see that where you got these amazing colleges and universities. And after these undergrads graduate, the first thing they do is go somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to Chicago, they're going to Dallas, they're going to New York. And the pandemic just really kind of brought awareness to it, to everybody, right? And then on top of that, the Great Resignation, as you call it, you know, that it is what it is. People have a lot more flexibility or the desire to have flexibility. They have a lot more options to generate income doing gig roles, right? The most famous one is, why is it Lyft? And what's the other one?
Uber?
Uber, sorry. Showing my age there. Yeah. So those are the most popular ones, but there's others, right? I was working with a client who if I told you the name of the food chain, it's one of the largest in the country. And one of their managers was actually doing Uber Eats while he was working.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And and this particular chain, that the GMs make really good money. They make anywhere from 90,000 up until the high 100s. And he was doing, So there's a lot of opportunities to do a lot of gig roles. And so they're demanding to have more flexibility, more opportunities to do other things and, just have a better work-life balance. So I do think that that's a huge contributor that may level off here shortly, but truly we don't have enough people. So ultimately the responsibility to an organization's growth and sustainability is to create pipeline. You need a pipeline of people, however that is. And there's definitely ways to create that pipeline in addition to some of the traditional ways.
So I was talking to a CEO of another company a couple of weeks ago, and he was very humble, but he was able to sort of share that his retention rate was very, very high. He had very few people defecting, even during some of the toughest times of COVID. And I was asking him, like, what is it you're doing? How are you able to maintain that stickiness, as you referred to recently? And he said it was all had to do with culture and supporting his team and doing amazing number of things. We worked with a builder up in Prescott, Arizona a while back, and the list of things that they did for their employees, short-term loans, taking them on vacations after 5 years, things that would be unheard of for most companies because it just seemed like, why would you do that? Have created a real following in these companies. Is that the sort of stuff, if we go outside of the we go outside the attracting piece, but now we want to keep them. We want to create a culture where we want to hear the buzz. We want more and more people to come back. We want to be able to not have to lose these people after 90 days in the probationary period. Is it culture that keeps people outside of the fact that they're being paid fairly?
Of course. I think that goes back to what I was talking about, the openness and transparency, right? Now, I bet you those are great selling points to a candidate when they're trying to attract them. I can just imagine being at a university career fair. Hey, young lady, young man, have you ever heard of us? No. Would you like to chat? No, I'm going somewhere here. Well, we've got some phenomenal benefits that I think would interest you. Do you mind if I share them with you for a quick minute before you head over to that other employer? Sure. And I can only imagine having that openness and transparency of having a peak within the culture. Hey, we work hard. We believe in rewarding our employees. We expect you to do this, that, and this. We attain our goals year over year, and we have profit sharing. We celebrate anniversaries. We develop trainings on a personal, whatever it is. Those are the things that ring true to individuals who are striving for personal and career growth, right? And
so good. So you
yeah.
mentioned Harvard. You said that you went on this wonderful experience and came back with a greater renewed focus around your own purpose. Do companies become more attractive when they do a similar process?
So I think I'd like to believe they do, but the fact is that not a lot of them are doing it.
Right.
Right.
Right. But we don't have time, we're trying to get through the summer and it's the third quarter and budget season's coming up. And we don't have time to invest in our executive team or lower level management team. And I know it's an important thing, but we got payroll to hit. We got that product to get out, that service to do. Oh, we got a new project over here. And all of a sudden another year goes by and we haven't seen each other.
Well, another year goes by and people keep walking out the door and you don't have enough people filling in the seats that are going empty, right? So it's kind of like a perpetual type of swirling down the drain. You're saying we need to stop it, but you're not changing anything that is causing for that drain to happen. I'll share another thing with you too, because I truly believe that it can be turned around, because I work with several nonprofits, and recently I had a conversation where we're trying to figure out some things around staff and helping with staff development, succession planning. And through the conversation, the executive director admittedly said, hey, I could be doing a lot more of this stuff, but I just don't have the time. I'm spread too thin.
Right.
How can you as a board member and the board itself help me so I can focus more? Because that's what I want to do. Right. And my friend, if this person who is helping others in a nonprofit and she's not seeking to be Fortune 500 company or anything, she recognizes it, then I believe others can do it too, right? Because her bottom line is the satisfaction of her constituents that she's serving, which ultimately presidents and CEOs of companies ultimately are seeking to do too. And if they can make their staff better, stronger, and if it's by giving some of themselves and focusing on it, then it can be done anywhere.
It's sort of like what you seem to be saying here, and I agree with you, is that developing and working on culture has to be as important as the short-term financial goals that keep your lights on. Because if you don't prioritize it, it will bite your butt down the road or make things worse than they are now. I remember early on in my business, my wife had noticed that we weren't taking any vacations, because we're a startup, right? We're just getting these things going. And she finally said, we got to actually make a priority of taking some vacations every year. And we have to call vacations a business activity in order to get our minds around the fact that this is important and this is how we renew and this is how we come up with new ideas, and it's our strategy time and renew time. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, that all that fear around what am I going to do if I'm gone for 2 weeks or whatever. But I think what you're sort of saying, and I'm sort of interpreting this, is that this culture work has to be as important as your P&L statement, if you will. Otherwise, it's going to become a real problem down the road.
Yeah, I think some people call those sabbaticals, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But
maybe
truly,
that's what you did at Harvard, right?
Well, I don't think you have to be an MBA or a CEO or go to Ivy League school by any account to know that it makes sense to pay attention to short, medium, and long-term strategies, right?
Good point.
So if you want to accomplish short-term goals, you put everything you need to put into that. If you want to show up a week or a month afterwards and have something to grow, you want to focus on your medium. And then if you want to be around for 10, 20 years, you focus on the long. And you've got to do it. If you put all your eggs in one basket, it might not serve you well in all aspects of your business. There's definitely things that will come up short.
Let me throw another scenario at you, Ivan. So the situation is we have several open recs. We are short-staffed. We have people doing 1 and 2 jobs themselves. Burnout is beginning to nip at our heels, or maybe already crawl up our legs. And we've hired an external firm and to help with recruitment, or maybe we have an internal recruiter. And part of the process is that we might want to have our candidates fill out some sort of style assessment and match that assessment to the job requirements. Like PI does that sometimes. There's a lot of different assessments out there that will match people to jobs. And maybe they don't fit, but my God, they're close. My God, we probably should hire them even though they're not a good fit, because we're concerned that we need more bodies. We need another person in here just because our own people are beginning to feel the stress and strain. What's your counsel when you're met with that dichotomy? Not the perfect candidate, but man, we really need the help.
So you're touching on something that happens every day, and let me change some words around for you. So you are trying to fit someone that looks like they're a round peg into a circle, but it looks a little bit oval. But they definitely have the transferable skills to come into your organization and be trained up, retrained, or they're doing the same things, but it's in a different environment, maybe using different tools, the same methodology, the mode. And so I think companies do need to do a lot better with identifying individuals with transferable skills that can come into their organization, especially since there's not enough people to go around, because you're competing for the same person. The accountant that you're competing for, when you're a bank, you're not just competing with other banks, you're competing with small businesses, big businesses, the retail store down the street. When you're looking for a marketing person, you're not just competing with other agents. So all these people are being sought after. Look for those with transferable skills that you can bring on and get into that circle that you're looking for. So I 100% believe in transferable skills.
I think you're right on, my friend. I was thinking about Good to Great, Jim Collins' book that was produced a few years ago. And back in the day, I think we didn't have this kind of issue. There was plenty of employees out there. And his advice was make sure that you get the right people on the bus in the right seats. It's that was the most important thing, was to get the right person on the team. Things are so different that we might say, not perfect, but we can train up, to your point. We can coach and mentor. Maybe their onboarding isn't a month, maybe it's 6 months, but we know that investment will pay dividends down the road.
Oh, it'll pay dividend. And it's what we've been talking about. I think the fear and the apprehension is, hey, I don't have time to teach him how to do that. It's got to be the perfect person. And truly the perfect person may not be the perfect fit. It's somebody who's got the skills, the transferable skills, and looks a little bit different than you realize. But in 3 to 4 months, 6 months, they're going to be doing things that are going to meet and exceed your expectations, right? I can tell you personally, I've been very pleased. I have somebody who's on board that didn't have any experience with recruiting, but I could see right away that she had all the personable attributes, the hard work needed, the resilience, right? When you're a recruiter, you got to deal with a lot of stuff. You got to have a good state of mind to deal with the personalities, etc. Crushing it. Do you think she needs me to help her with anything on a day-to-day basis? Sure. She'll reach out every once in a while, but more often than not, she is just kicking and taking names, and candidates love her, clients love her. And she started off with absolutely no experience. And she's
great point you're making, though. So aside from the subject matter expert skills, whatever that might be, you're sort of indicating there could be some very transferable skills that one would want to have or one would want to look for. You mentioned hard work. You mentioned resilience. What else? If I were a candidate and I said, do I have these characteristics? What would they be aside from those two?
All right. So, Dean, great question. Starting to get into some of my secrets of success here.
That's what we want, man.
Right. So usually I want to try to charge a fee.
Don't give away the farm yet. The
Yeah.
book has still got to come out. Don't forget.
Exactly. I've been wanting to write a book here, and maybe this is just a slap in the face I need. But
yeah, it is.
Truly, I think you really need to assess if I can answer in a different way.
Sure.
I often tell clients, say, hey, I'm an advocate for diversity. I do diversity of recruiting, specialize in diversity. And I tell them, don't get hung up on diversity per se, because diversity looks different to every organization, right? So what you think it might mean to me or some, look at it from your organization's lens. And then part of diversity is truly just doing things differently to get a different result, right? So if you've been doing things the same way and you're still not getting people knocking on the door, you're still not attracting them. Let's change it up a little bit. And, part of that is being able to, now you can advertise in different places where, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you wouldn't dare advertise there, but maybe consider it now. Maybe talk to some people from other industries that you would not have chosen to speak with before. If your strategy at one point was to only seek out very successful people in different levels across the board, maybe look for some university recruiting to fill that gap, because our universities and colleges, it's changed. There's a lot more online and what they used to call non-traditional students. I don't know if they still call them that, but you've got, right?
Yeah, I love that label.
It's different. Yeah, you remember they used to call that, right?
I remember that.
I did my undergrad at the University of Cincinnati, and they were, in addition to a whole bunch of other things, they were very progressive, but they had one of the first evening colleges for working professionals, right? So I don't even think evening college is a thing anymore, but things like
I don't think so either. Right.
Yeah. So I think you need the opportunity under a diversity umbrella or whatever to just have some insight in how you can do things differently. And I would dare say what may feel like the toughest thing or where you have the most resistance may be where you can find the most success as well.
So I love it. I love the perspective of the company and how they might be able to approach this. I want to sort of summarize our conversation by saying, if this is something you would agree with around what a candidate would hopefully bring to any position that would make them very attractive. One, you said hard work. You said 2, resilience. I'm throwing in a couple of others, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Emotional intelligence, meaning self-awareness, awareness of others, et cetera. Agility, being able to pivot in this VUCA world that we're in. And then maybe lastly, being innovative, being able to come up with new ideas, going back to the diversity of thought idea and diversity of perspective, is that we need to do things differently. But that also comes on the side of the employee. Does it sound like a pretty good list?
That sounds like a phenomenal list. I think it, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's an 11 or a 12.
Well, there's your first 4 chapters, my friend.
No, you're co-authoring it with me, right?
Oh, right. Or at least I can write the introduction. Yeah, okay.
Come on.
Sorry, man. Okay.
let me add one more thing to that.
Sure.
Because this is something that happened in the last couple of days. I think our analytical friends or those that are more to the analytical side than in the center.
Yep.
They rely on their intelligence and their knowledge, which is great. But in this day and age, not having a strong voice or showing enthusiasm is quickly becoming a detriment to candidates. And think of it, there are a lot more initial interviews over the phone and video. And unless you're like you and me and you're comfortable being open and using your hands and laughing a little bit, some people aren't like that.
Yeah.
And they don't need to do that. But in addition to that whole list that you gave, enthusiasm is important. You don't got to do cartwheels, but show that you're happy, maybe a little bit excited. You're moving the meter with speaking with the recruiter. Keep in mind, these recruiters aren't your hiring managers. Or a lot of times, the hiring manager has someone above them who's going to interview you too. And the lack of energy and enthusiasm can project some negative connotations that you don't want to project. So I would tell my analytical friends to keep that in mind.
Great point, Yvan. Really, I love it. So how can people find you, follow you, learn from you?
All right. So this is my favorite part.
The pitch.
The pitch.
I'm kidding.
Right? I'm a sales guy.
Yeah, right. So, and the pitch.
So they can find me at hamiltondemo.com. Again, that's hamiltondemo.com. And when you go there, you'll see some videos. I've got my phone number on there. They can also call me. I love to get phone calls. And my number is 513-257-9683. That's a Cincinnati, Ohio area code, by the way. Dean, I don't know if you've ever been to Cincinnati.
I have.
But again, that's 513-257-9683. And they can also feel free to reach me through social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and it's Yvan with a Y. So if they'd like to email me as well, that's Yvan, YVAN, at hamiltondemo.com.
Quick question.
At hamiltondemo.com.
What's the demo mean? Is that a hyphenation of two different names? I think of demo, I think of a demonstration. Explain the demo part.
Yeah, so it's not as great as a story. I need to come up with a story that
yeah, you should.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I started the business, I started it with my partner, Sean Hamilton. And he wanted to come up with a great name that was just going to drive interest and traffic. And he just thought he could come up with the best name that anyone could ever come up with. And I looked at him, I'm like, oh, you've never tried to find a name for a company before? Because literally any and every name that you could possibly think of has been thought of or registered. So let's see what happens. And it was kind of a joke. I told him, I'll bet you in 2 months, we'll just end up calling ourselves Hamilton Demo. Hamilton for his last name, and Demo short for Demosthenes. And he's like, no, yeah.
Oh,
so
you're the first part of your last name. I get it.
Yeah. So really, it should have been Demosthenes Hamel, but we.
Yeah, of course. Well, it should. Now that you're the CEO, you should flip it.
Yeah, exactly. But we agreed on Hamilton Demo, and he was just so sure, and I was sure. My intuition told me that I was going to be right. So we made a friendly wager, nothing crazy, just buying someone lunch or dinner or whatever. And,
awesome.
The rest is history. Hamilton Demo it was.
Yvan, you're a great way to finish the week. I really appreciate your energy, your enthusiasm, your expertise in this subject, and I really wish you the best. And please let me know when that darn book comes out.
I will, my friend. You're going to be the co-author. You'll know exactly what it is. And Dean, if you don't mind, after you sign off, can I stay in your waiting room? I'd love to talk to you about something else. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
if you remember how we started the interview,
exactly. All right. Have a good day, my friend.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.